Yes. So this is, again, part of Mr. Kim Singh's life lessons. Penny wise, pound foolish. This is not a mathematical formula by any means, but it is a statement for how people treat money. People are very good at saving pennies. They're happy to drive around and find the cheapest place to fill up. But then they are also pound foolish in the sense that, for example, places where you can save a lot more money, they don't really take the time to consider. And one of them is finances. So obviously as a high school student, you're earning money potentially from work or you're getting pocket money and stuff like that. But as you start to earn more money, you'll start to realize that the money that you get, the extra interest you get from the money in the bank, isn't all that much. Because remember when Will calculated, when we leave it in that Bendigo bank or even that Ubank account, after about a few years, we're only getting like $100. Which again, I think everyone would take a free $100. But when you compare it to other ways that people try to generate income, then it doesn't really compare. And one of the most popular ways is investing in shares. And again, I'm going to have to call upon my business studies students here. Have you guys looked much at what shares are and how they operate? Or not too much? Yeah. Again, just a general idea, like, what is a share? Yes, Emily's going to give us a really good answer.
Isn't it a piece of the company?
Yeah, that's essentially what exactly right. So when you buy shares in, what have I got here, for example, Westpac, right? When you buy shares in Westpac, back up, yeah. So I just, pen? So Emily gave a really good explanation of shares that are essentially just buying a bit of the company. Now obviously with a big company like Westpac, right, when you buy, how much is the Westpac share price? Does it say here? I think it said, let's say it's $16.37. When you pay $16.37, you're not buying much of Westpac if you think about it, because Westpac is, multi-million, billion-dollar company, right? So you're owning a very small portion of it, right? But when you invest in shares, there are essentially two ways you can make money from them. The first way is from growth, and the second way is from something called dividends. Now we're going to focus on this one in particular, and this is a formula that I need you guys to look at. It's called what we call the dividend yield. And the dividend yield is basically, you can think about as interest. And so you've seen interest many times before. But why this one is slightly different is because rather than just putting a certain amount of money into your bank account and leaving it there, the way that dividends work is that they work based on each share that you own and also the market price per share. So let me just say that again, right? So what happens with a company is that they'll say, okay, for each share that you've got, like if you own one share, I'm going to give you 30 cents. I'm going to give you 30 cents for each share that you have. So obviously, if you only have one share, you're not getting a lot of dividend, right? You're not getting much interest. But the more shares you buy, the more dividend you're going to get, the more interest you're going to get, right? So let's have a look at Robert over here. And he's got 50 of these Westpac shares. So let's see what we can calculate with them. And this is the mathematical kind of portion now. We're going to look at, okay, what's the total value of the investment, right? So what's the total, how much is it worth, basically? And so if I've got 50 of these, and I'm paying $16.37 per share, well, how do I work out the value? All I have to do is multiply. I can just do 50 multiplied by 16.37, and you can calculate that out. Times 16.37. Perfect. Okay, so that's worth $818.5, or $818.50, right? So far, so good. But this is not actually, this is just putting money into Westpac. I'm just giving money to Westpac right now. What do I get out of it? Why would I give money to Westpac? Yeah, I own a little bit, a very small portion of the company. But ultimately, people invest in the share market because they want some returns, right? They want a bit more than what they would get in a bank account. So one of the ways is that they can get dividend. So let's say we're getting 80 cents per share. A common HSC question that they'll ask is to calculate the dividend yield. Now the dividend yield, we have the formula for it up here. And if you look at this last summer, this is probably the most important thing. The dividend yield is actually a percentage. Right? So when they're asking for the dividend yield, just remember they're looking for a percentage there. Just like how when you were trying to find the rate a few times, like in those math-based questions, now we want to find the dividend yield, the percentage. That's basically how much are we getting back. what are our returns, essentially, right? So what's the formula? Well, I'll just write it again up here. So the yield is equal to the dividend per share. So you tell me that. And also the market price per share, so what it's worth. So if you're very observant, you'll notice that actually the dividend yield depends on what the current price of a share is, because the share prices, if you've seen in the news, they constantly change. So that just means also the dividend yield is constantly changing. It's a bit of a tricky concept to work with because it combines two things. So let's just calculate first, and I'll give you a few more examples. So the dividend per share, well, they tell you that in the question, don't they? They tell you it's 80 cents. So that's 0.80. Or divided by the market price per share. Exactly right, Will. Yeah, 16.37. And that should be a percentage for us. So again, we can calculate that out. Okay, and so if we want it as a percentage, we'll multiply by 100, put a percentage symbol at the end. How many decimal places did I say? 2. So what's that? 4.89. Okay, so that's roughly 4.89%. Okay, so you can see immediately that that's a lot better actually than the interest that we were looking at before, because Bendigo Bank and UBank, they were all offering, like 0.25% or 1.6% or something like that. 4.89%, that's a significant improvement, right? Before I move on to the next page, oh, actually, no, there's another dividend yield question. We can do that one as well. But before I look at purchasing shares, I want to focus on these types of problems, because actually in this year's HSC, they did ask a dividend yield question. And traditionally, students find these more difficult because it combines something that's a bit like a new concept, like this idea of what a share is, and it also combines percentages and fractions, which students typically struggle with more. So I want to do a few more of these questions as well. Right, so we'll look at this one over here. So it's again slightly different. So Callum here, he's got 1,000 of these Telstra shares, and this is a bit better. Okay, we're not just buying a few of them, and they're valued at $2,840. He received a dividend of 8 cents per share, and we want to find the dividend yield. So remember, I'll write the formula again just to remind you, right? The dividend yield is equal to the dividend per share, all divided by the market price per share. So, I guess we want to think about what information do we actually have. We have the dividend per share, right? Samara, how much is the dividend per share in this question? Do they tell us?
0.08.
Perfect, 0.08. Nicola, do we have the market price per share there? Do we have the market price per share? Yeah, they didn't give it. Like, remember over here, right? They told us that Westpac was 16.37, but over here, they're just telling us that he has 1,000 of these shares, and it's worth 2,840.
You sure it says divided?
Yeah. Oh, it says dividend. So this per share. Yeah, good. Good, that's exactly right. Because think about what this is saying. Remember, think about how shares work, first of all. You can buy one of them, or you can buy 1,000 of them. He bought 1,000 of them, and they're worth $2,840. So if I want to go back to what one of them is worth, right, how can I do that? Or let's do what George did. They're worth $2,840, and I've got 1,000 of them. So I'm just going to divide by 1,000. Oh, yeah, that's right, yeah. Because, if you multiply, it became bigger, right? I want to know what one of them is worth. It should be a pretty small number, right? Oh, remember, what kind of number are you calculating there? Because what are we actually trying to calculate here? That's right, $2.84. Yeah. That's right. So, can you see how they make these a little trickier, right? They sort of make the wording a bit strange, or they give you different bits of information. But you can still calculate the dividend yield, right? Because we now have all the relevant information, Ethan. We've got the dividend per share, they gave us that. We calculated the market price per share, that's $2.84. So now all you have to do is put that into your calculator. Ethan, would you mind doing us the honors? 0.08 over 2.84? Perfect, yes. So times 100, and that's 2.82%, okay? Correct to 2 decimal places. Any questions about that one? No? I'm going to leave...
Alright, go back to
Oh, sorry. Now, I'm going to leave those other two up there for you to try. And...
Do you have any shares, sir?
Do I have any shares? Well, actually, here's another interesting thing. Fun fact. Hands up if you're working here. So, I don't know if casual workers, do you guys get super? Probably not, hey? You can, okay. Anybody who has super actually owns shares because that's where the money goes. When you have superannuation, they invest that money in shares. So anyone who has superannuation will be an owner of shares, actually. So, fun fact for you.